that you would speak to us, that you would proclaim truth, that you would challenge us, that you would encourage us, and that we would just, enjoy our time not only in your presence, but among your people as well. So we thank you, we praise you in the name of Jesus. Amen. So, most of you should be familiar with the book of Ruth. Most of you should know that it starts off very tragically, right? And so the question I want to ask is, how have you dealt with things similar? Like, have you had a tragic experience? Have you suffered like just great disappointment in your life? How have you responded? And actually, Joe picked some good songs because, what is it? Blessed Be Your Name. Matt Redman wrote that right after 9/11, 2001, back when the World Trade Center was hit by those planes. And so to me, like, some of you might be young and you're like, I don't know what that is, or I've heard about it, I've read about it once. So, and for me, I was working as an engineer, and I saw it happen live, right? Not the first plane, but I saw like the second plane live, and then I saw the buildings collapse live, and I was just like, that was one of the craziest days of my life. Just watching what was going on there. And for me, especially because I was working in Texas, but I had a lot of friends in New York, so I was really worried, like, are my friends okay? That song was a response to that. Blessed be your name. You give and you take away. Like, this was Matt Redman's response to this tragic event. Many of you know, like, the hymn, It Is Well With My Soul. That song also, it was a response to a man losing his entire family in a shipwreck, right? He wrote that song as he was passing by the same spot where they perished on another boat. So many people have responded in powerful and amazing ways, praising God in the midst of tragedy. And so, I just want you to think, like, and I don't want to necessarily bring up past hurts or anything like that. I don't want you to dwell in that. But at the same time, like, these things happen. Now, for me, honestly, I haven't had that much tragedy in my life. The worst thing that happened to me was when I was like maybe second grade. I saw my dog get hit by a car. It was pretty rough. Right? I was a little kid. And what happened was we were walking to school. I lived within walking distance of school, but there was a very busy road that we had to cross to get there. And we had this was my first dog. We called him Snuggles. Right? So there's it was actually a mutt. It was like, I don't even know what breed it was because it was many different breeds at once. But it was an adorable dog, right? And it was still young. It was kind of untrained. We went to cross the street and we were waiting for the traffic to die down, and the dog just ran without us, right? But he crossed. And he was waiting for us. He's like, what's wrong with you? He turned around, and then he tried to come back, and that's when we watched. And it was, yeah. So to me, that's the worst thing I've ever gone through. And it was a little bit traumatic. I'm not going to deny that. But like, I've had friends who've gone through things such like of greater magnitude than that. Like one of my friends from high school, one of my really good friends, his parents, there was a big age gap, so his father was very old. His father was probably maybe around 80 or something like that. So his father passed away when he was, I think, a freshman in college. But his mom was young. His mom was, I think, maybe early 50s, late 40s. She passed away the next year. Completely different causes. And like, to me, I was like, wow, like, how can you lose both of your parents when you're that young? Like, how do you even respond to that? And so I've had friends who've gone through some rather tragic events. Myself, aside from that dog, not so bad. But I just wanted you to think, like, when tragedy happens, when difficulties come, when struggles come, how have I responded? Because the person we're going to read about in this first chapter of the book of Ruth is going to experience a very tragic event in her life. So with that, Ruth 1. Let's look in our Bibles, smartphones, or just stare at the screen. Ruth 1, starting from verse 1. Where the Lord says this. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Kilian. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah. And they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah, by the way, that's where Oprah Winfrey gets her name from, and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. When Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them, she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living and set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud and said to her, "We will go back with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters. It is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has turned against me." At this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. "Look," said Naomi, "your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her." But Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. So the 2 women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the women exclaimed, "Can this be Naomi?" "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me." So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. Kind of a downer, this chapter, and it's setting the tone, and for us, we're continuing in this theme for the year of being transformers, understanding how we are transformed by the gospel, and understanding how God can use us as agents of change. Now, for the last couple of months, we've been going through the book of Esther, and we saw in this story how this little orphan girl was raised from poverty and obscurity to becoming the queen of Persia. And then when her people were in peril, she risked her life not once, but multiple times, and it affected change. Right? She changed the course of where history was going. And she was part of God's redemptive plan. So that was really the lesson I wanted us to learn from Esther, is that we too can be part of God's redemptive plan. Right? He used Esther to help bring deliverance to his people. Now, when you look at the story of Esther, granted she was someone that went from rags to riches, this person who ultimately was nothing but became the queen, this is a different story. The story of Ruth is about a very normal person dealing with normal problems. She's not a queen by any means, but you'll find out later that the end result of what happens here is of greater proportions. So God can even use those that are in normal circumstances. You don't have to be a queen. And so, interestingly enough, also, I found out that there are 4 books that books of the Bible that every Jew reads every year, because there are 7 festivals. So 4 of these festivals, they read an entire book of the Bible as part of the festivities. So these are 4 books of the Bible that Jews read every single year. So at Passover, they read the Song of Songs. During the Feast of Weeks or Pentecost, they read this book, the book of Ruth. During the Feast of Tabernacles, they read Ecclesiastes, kind of, it's kind of a downer, but to understand that the temple was destroyed. Purim, as we know from the past couple months, that's the festival of Esther and how they were rescued from near doom. And so, because of this, any good Jew knows these 4 books very well because they read it once a year, every single year. Okay? But unlike Esther, like I said, Esther was a very controversial book. It was popular, but they had a hard time including it in the Bible because it never talked about God. Now this story talks a lot about God. This story, there's no question that it belongs in the Bible. And so here we have a similar story that is well loved by the Jewish people, but that very clearly shows how God used an individual to bring about an amazing change in the lives of many people. So right away, starting from verse 1, it tells us the setting. It tells us in the days when the judges ruled. And so for those of you that don't know your Old Testament history, this was a really difficult time. If you look at the book of Judges, well, I always lose this. If you look at the book of Judges, this is a phrase that comes up again and again. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. So in the days of Judges, judges weren't rulers. They were just basically military leaders that brought freedom for a brief period of time. But then later on, there would be another enemy that would come again. So the time of Judges was a difficult season. Right? There was no stability. There was no leadership. Basically, they were always at war. And this is the time that the book of Ruth is set in. And so, well, one thing that comes out very quickly is, in the very beginning, when it's talking about who the people are, it talks about how they are Ephrathites from Bethlehem. Now for us, we're not Jewish, so this would mean nothing to us. But if you were a Jew and you see this phrase, immediately you know who they're talking about. There's a very famous person in the Bible that is also an Ephrathite from Bethlehem, which we will talk about later. But immediately, this is a foreshadowing, so that anyone reading this, especially a good Jew, they would know, oh, this is going to have a good ending. Because they know that something good is going to come from this. So, although you've read this chapter, chapter 1, and it's very depressing, right in the very beginning, this one little phrase is a very big clue. God is going to change the story. So, here you have this family going to a different place, a different country. Do you guys know about Moab? Anybody know how Moab came to be? Do you guys know your Old Testament, Genesis?
I think it's from Lot
Yes.
and his daughters.
Yes.
They came out of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yes.
The daughters slept with the father.
Yeah,
and
pretty
then
messed up.
And then Lot and Ammon. That's how those two people were.
So basically, Lot, he goes in a cave with his daughters, and he has children with his daughters. Very disgusting act. And the sons, as Catherine said, are Moab and Ammon, and they end up becoming the enemies of Israel. So these are people that are sort of related to Israel, but they end up becoming the enemies of Israel. And basically, these people are going to Moab because there's no food. Now, it's kind of ironic. Do you know what Bethlehem means?
House of bread.
House of bread.
House of bread.
Yeah, house of bread. So that's the irony, is they live in Bethlehem, which is literally means house of bread, but there's no bread. And so they leave. And they go to Moab, which is a foreign country. So you have these Jewish people leaving to a foreign country, but not only a foreign country, a land of their enemies. And they're going there because of necessity. Now, a lot of people like to look at this part of the book and say they were sinning by leaving Israel. And then when it talks about how they took Moabite women, it says the other people say they're sinning because they're marrying foreigners. And there may be some level of truth to that, but at the end of the day, the passage never says anything like that. The passage never claims that they were living in sin. But at the end of the day, something horrible happens. Right? Immediately, Elimelech dies, and then 10 years later, Mahlon and Chilion die as well. And so, think about this. This woman has lost not only her husband, but her 2 sons. I can't think of a more difficult tragedy than that. Right? Granted, I'm not married, I don't have children, so this is all theoretical. But I can assume, because people have said, like, the most tragic event is for a parent to bury their own children. Right? And this is exactly what this woman is doing without her husband. So, I can understand why Naomi would be so upset, why she would be just struggling so much, because she has lost everything. Her husband and her 2 sons. And all that she has left are these 2 daughter-in-laws. And so during this time, the house of bread, I guess, fills up with bread again. And so she hears that things are going well back in Israel, so she goes back. She decides to go back, and her daughters-in-law decide to go back with her. But she turns to them and says, "Why are you coming with me? Go back home. Go back to your mother's house. Find another husband." She's being, honestly, I think she has good intentions here. And what she prays over them is, she says, "May the Lord show you kindness." And she uses a key word here. The word that's translated as kindness is the word hesed, which if you know the Old Testament, this is an extremely important word. It's often translated as loving kindness or unfailing love. Here it's just translated as kindness. But she is praying. She's praying for hesed over her 2 daughters-in-law. And I think she's being sincere in this. And the thing is, hesed itself, this word that's translated as kindness, it's an extremely important word in the Old Testament, and ultimately, it is revealed throughout this entire book. The irony is, Naomi prays for hesed over her daughters-in-law, but at the end of the book you will see that she is the one who receives hesed. So what we are going to see in the next couple chapters is God revealing his unfailing love to this daughter, Naomi. And the thing about hesed that's the key part of understanding this word is God showing this loving kindness, God showing this unfailing love. It comes from the place of relationship. The Israelites had become the people of God at Mount Sinai. They had officially entered into a covenant relationship. Essentially, they became married to God. And when God shows his hesed, it has nothing to do with what Israel does. It is God showing his faithfulness to his commitment. Right? Doesn't matter if Israel is faithful to him. He will stick to his promise. That is what hesed is about. Hesed is not about us. Hesed is all about God. God's love. And that's what we're going to see in this book. So I want to point this out, because this is the irony. Naomi is praying for hesed for her daughters-in-law, but she is the one who's going to receive it. Now, who is Ruth? So Ruth is a Moabite, obviously. So here's the thing: is Esther is a story about a woman. Okay, that in itself is special. But here, Ruth is also a woman, but she's not a Jew. Right? This is a foreigner. This is someone who's not from the people of God. And that's what's remarkable about the story. Now, she's not the only one in the Bible that's important. There's Rahab the prostitute, another foreigner who God uses and who God blesses and ends up becoming part of Israel. Ruth is similar to that. She is a Moabite. She is a foreigner. She's not of these people, but she shows amazing loyalty, amazing faithfulness to this woman. Now, when it says Ruth clung to her, the verb that's used there is the same verb that is used in Genesis 2 when it talks about the institution of marriage. How a man cleaves to a woman and two become one flesh. Right? In that same way, that same verb, it says when Ruth clings to Naomi. That is the intensity with which she will not let go of this woman. And the other interesting thing is, in some canon, so in some of the Hebrew Bibles, they made the order of the books of the Bible so that Ruth came right after Proverbs. Now, if you know Proverbs ends with Proverbs 31, which most girls know. Guys should know this. But Proverbs 31 talks about the woman of noble character. And so the reason why some of the scholars put it in this order, because they said, Ruth is the embodiment of what Proverbs 31 is about. And so you have to understand, Ruth is a very beloved character to the Jews, and especially in the Old Testament. And again, you'll understand a little bit more why later. And I love what she says. When Naomi's like, get out of here, your sister-in-law left as well, and she says, where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will bury you. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. Right? Now again, I'm not married, but what daughter-in-law would ever say this to their mother-in-law? I know in Korean dramas, that dynamic is like, that's what half Korean dramas are about, right? Well, what do they call daughter-in-law in Korean again? Melody, right? It's always about that relationship, right? But like here, like, if you made a drama like this in Korea, no one would believe it. 말도 안 돼. Like, this is, like, think about what this woman is doing. Now it's interesting because if you look at her and compare her to all the other characters in the Old Testament, no one ever took the step of faith. The closest person you could compare her to was Abraham. Abraham left his country, his family, because God called him to leave. Here this woman is doing the same thing. She is leaving her country, her family, but God didn't tell her to go. She doesn't even believe in God at this point. This is a foreign woman. The only reason why she's doing this is because she cares about this old woman. She's still young. She has her whole life ahead of her, and she is tossing it away because she loves this woman so much. That's amazing. And like I said, you can't make a drama off this. No one would believe it. Now, the sad thing is, as amazing as this is, and as blessed as Naomi is, she completely doesn't even see it. Because right after this, you see, okay, she gives up. She lets Ruth tag along with her. They go and they enter Bethlehem, and everyone's like, "Hey, is this Naomi?" They haven't seen her in more than 10 years. And she responds by saying, "Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara." Right? Now this is important because the name Naomi means pleasant or lovely, right? So literally what she's saying is, don't call me pleasant, call me bitter. Right? She's using a play on her name, saying, I'm not Naomi anymore. Right? You called me pleasant all my life, but that's not what I've experienced. I've only experienced bitterness and hurt. So call me what I actually am. You can just sense the hurt that she has and how deep it is. I've joked about this before, but for me, like, names are very important because when you call someone by their name, you're actually proclaiming that meaning over them. I think the Bible treats names very importantly. This is why I've always joked that my name is Teo. It means big glory, but in America they shortened it to Dave because they don't like long names. So basically, people have always proclaimed big over me, which is how I ended up this way. And so, like, had I at some of my life said, "Don't call me Dave, call me Soul," right? Maybe I'd be skinnier, and I don't know. But regardless, this is what Naomi has experienced. People have always proclaimed loveliness and pleasantness over her. She's only experiencing bitterness. So she's like, call me what I am. And it's absolutely consumed her. And it's consumed her so much to the point that she is blind to what she actually has. If you notice this encounter where she talks, she never once mentions Ruth. Right? Ruth is with her at this very moment. She shows up and she's just complaining about, I came, I left full and I'm coming back empty. Like, call me Mara, bitterness. She never once she's like, oh, by the way, here's my daughter-in-law. He's like standing right next to her. So it shows you, it's like, Ruth doesn't even exist to this woman. She is completely consumed by her bitterness to the point where it is blinding her to what she actually has, to what is actually in front of her. And so this is where I want to turn it to us, because I don't know if any of us has experienced the level of tragedy that Naomi has, but I'm sure many of us have gone through seasons of difficulty and frustration. Maybe some of us have had years of things not working out, or have had favor that we thought we deserved or wished to have, and it just wasn't happening. Right? I think many of us can understand what that experience is like. To want certain things, to not get them, and ultimately to start to blame God. You see, clearly here, Naomi is blaming God for everything that happened to her. everyone here has probably had that similar experience at some point, where we've gotten so frustrated and have become so blind that we don't actually see that God is being faithful to us. Now for myself, in preparing for this message, I knew I was going to go into Ruth a couple weeks ago, and I've been meditating on it for a while. When you read this part, and I think some people, when they see this exchange where Naomi is like, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, they're like, dude, calm down, what's wrong with you? But for me, I'm reading it, I'm like, man, I kind of know what she's going through. I understand what it's like to be that frustrated and to be that upset. For me, it's I've gone through seasons where things haven't worked out. I've joked about it before, but I thought I was going to get married at 25, right? 25 was a long time ago. So it's for me, it's things haven't really happened the way I expected. And so even coming here to this ministry, it's had a lot of ups and downs. And this year in particular has been kind of difficult because in my first couple of years, I always had that one or two people that I kind of felt had my back. When I first started this ministry 3 years ago, I had my cousin Chiwon, right? And so my cousin Chiwon, everybody loves Chiwon, and for me, it's I felt I can count on him. And then he left, and he became a missionary. Fine. But then, Sam and Audrey came after that. I was like, all right, so this is a couple I connect with. They're prepping to be missionaries. They have good hearts. Sam's a pastor. He was serving faithfully. It was great. Then he left last summer. And so since then, honestly, I went into this year knowing that I had lost a lot of my support, quote unquote. And just felt, going into this year very burdened. I was like, I feel like I'm on my own. That's just the weight I've carried for most of this year. It's to the point where it's made me not see what God has been doing. And I shared about this before, that our head pastor was the one that noted that the numbers at News had increased, right? In the middle of a meeting, he's like, hey, give me a report. I'm like, what? And I just said random stuff. I was like, why did he ask me to do that? And I looked at our attendance numbers. I was like, oh, he's been noticing that we've grown, and we've actually grown 50%, right? Which is actually very significant. And I was like, I didn't notice. And so it's all these things have been going on, and God has been blessing and encouraging in different ways, but I'm in a season where I've been blind to a lot of this. And so as I was preparing this, I was like, man, I completely understand what Naomi's going through. And so that's the thing, is that no matter what difficulty you're in, no matter what season you're in, no matter how hard it seems, God is still faithful. The hesed of God will always come through. That's what the story is about. This story is about the hesed of God to Naomi. That loving kindness, that unfailing love. And I proclaim to everyone in this room, no matter how hard your season is, no matter how difficult things might be, the hesed of God will come through. I can say this with certainty because the hesed of God has nothing to do about us. It has completely to do with His faithfulness to us. And what I want you to understand is that if you believe in God, if you have a relationship with God, He will never give up. Doesn't matter what you do. Doesn't matter if you're unfaithful. Doesn't matter if you completely lose track and start focusing your eyes on other things. He's not going to give up on you. So for us, our job is to not let ourselves become blind. Our job is to not focus so much on the bad that we're not seeing the good that's right under our nose. That's the thing with the story, is that Ruth is right under the nose of Naomi and she doesn't even notice. For those of you that are going through a difficult season, I want to tell you, God has probably already provided something for you and is right there in front of you. You just never seen it. So brothers and sisters, let's open our eyes. Let's remember who our God is, that He is indeed a good, good Father. that wants to bless us, that wants to encourage us, and probably has already been doing things that we just have been ignorant to and blind to. So let's open our eyes, see the faithfulness of God. And as I titled this, Mara no more. Right? Rather than proclaiming bitterness, let's proclaim more Naomi in our life. Let's pray. Let's take a moment to just pray that God would, if you're going through a season where you've been fixing your eyes more on the negative things, I want you to pray that God would start to reveal the blessings that have been in your life this whole time, that you've kind of had a blind eye towards. So let's just take a moment to pray and ask God, why don't just show me, Lord. I know you've been faithful. I know that your love is unfailing toward me, but sometimes I don't see it. So just take a moment to ask God, reveal that love to me. How have you been doing this all along? Let's pray. Blessing us and showering us with your goodness and